Hello, friends. I hope you're here to learn about pulling because if you're not, this is going to be a pretty long, boring video for you. But if you are, then I hope this video will be helpful. If I do say so myself. I think pulling it's kind of funny because I think a lot of people in the community know about pulling. They know it's something supports are supposed to do, something about lane equilibrium, but they don't fully understand it. And I think when you don't understand it, you end up misusing it. Pulling is a very neutral tool for you to use in this game, pun fully intended. It's a double edged sword that can help you and it can hurt you. And if you don't understand it and you just try to pull, can you really be surprised if sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't? No. So we want to fully understand it so we can make use of it and help ourselves out in our game. Let's talk about the consequences of pulling. Very intentional word choice because, again, it's not inherently good or bad, but it does have an effect on the lane. And we just want to get the good effects without putting ourselves in a bad situation. First is lane equilibrium. I think this is the one that most people are a bit aware of, at least, where, when your lane is pushing, you go and pull a camp, and that helps to establish lane equilibrium. Partially true. It used to be more true, where you could pull the small camp, and then you would connect the hard camp to it, and that would kill off your creep wave, and that did help establish equilibrium. Nowadays, you can still do that, but it's a lot harder, where the small camp and the hard camp are farther apart, so it's harder to connect that pull. And the enemy is also smarter nowadays, so they're not just going to let you do whatever you want. They want to come interrupt your pulls. And because of that, pulling has evolved, but that original answer of just pulling whenever your lane is pushed, that didn't really get updated. So people have, I think, been misusing pulls a bit. And when you try to just pull when your lane is pushing and you don't do it correctly, you'll end up just pushing your lane even further, which is kind of the opposite effect you wanted. Now, this next point is the side that I don't see talked about as often, where pulling is a way to manipulate the distribution of experience and gold. If you didn't watch the first video in this series, that's okay. It was pretty boring. But the topic of it was that we want our carries to get a lot of experience and gold. It's just kind of their thing. That's how we win the game, is we get them the resources they need. And we, as the hard support, we don't need as much gold and experience. Pulling is a way for us to start distributing the resources to our carry. So instead of splitting it evenly, 50-50, we start giving them a little bit more. We get them like 80% and we take 20, maybe a little less, 70 to 30% or something like that. I don't know the exact math. But that idea of getting them their resources is part of what pulling is. But if you do it incorrectly, you can actually push resources to your enemy and make them stronger. And that is obviously not in our favor, where we are making them stronger and then they beat up our carry. Lane is in a bad spot. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to start with lane equilibrium, talking about not even considering pulling yet, just understanding lane equilibrium so that we can then understand the effects of pulling on it. And then we'll understand how that helps us manipulate golden experience in our lane. Let's take a look at some basic stats to get us started. At the start of the game, melee creeps have 550 health and 2 armor, whereas range creeps have 300 health and 0 armor. Melee creeps have 21 damage, range creeps have 23. So in terms of health, melee creeps are obviously tankier. And in terms of damage, you might think it's kind of similar, but that is a bit deceptive. There's no easy way to tell in this game, but range creeps actually have an attack type called Pierce, which does 150% damage to units that have basic armor types. Coincidentally, all lane creeps have basic armor. So what that means is that this melee creep would attack for 21 damage approximately to an enemy creep, whereas this guy is hitting around 35 damage. So range creeps bring a good portion of the damage in a wave, whereas these guys are just kind of this meat shield that they're just there to soak up attacks. They will do damage, of course, but when we think about it, we're going to generalize it so that the range creep is the damage and these guys are the health. When we think of what else might push a lane, obviously having a different number of creeps will affect equilibrium. So in a equal match, 3 melee creeps versus 1 range and 1 range versus 3 melee creeps and 1 range, even. But if you take away one of those creeps, obviously you have 4 versus 3, so the Dire should win. Now that will shift around a little bit, right? So if you had 2 melee creeps and 1 range creep, they will actually do more damage before dying off, but they'll die off probably a little quicker. Whereas if you had 3 melee creeps, they'll still die off, but they're going to take longer to die off, and they're probably going to do a little less damage. It is difficult to control your own creeps. So this is the next thing. We're moving into more advanced topics. If you are this Juggernaut and you want to prevent your lane from pushing, what can you do? You can deny this melee creep because he's below 50, but no one else is below 50. At best, what you can do is body block the creeps a little bit to let this guy get ahead so that, it's these 4 creeps versus this 1 melee creep. Maybe they can kill him before the rest of them arrive. But ultimately, besides those 2 things, it's very difficult for most heroes to prevent their lane from pushing when they build up a creep advantage like this. Because most heroes cannot cast spells on their own creeps, and you're limited to attacking your own creeps when they fall below 50%. Let's play this out. Let's see if I wanted to try to prevent this lane from pushing. I can attack this guy, and now I'm stuck to wait. I can attack this. And if I spend any time getting last hits, well, I'm going to miss. Like, my lane is going to push. And even trying to do that, now I have more creeps here. And there's not much I can do. I guess I'll have to get that last hit, right? That would be the smart choice. And I wasn't really able to control my lane from pushing. What if we come over here? Where, what if this is the situation where the enemy team has more creeps and I want to prevent them from pushing? Well, I can run them in circles, wait for my creeps to get here, and now I can just attack. I'm not limited to wait below 50%. I can choose who I attack. So I can attack the range creeps first because they do the most damage. And you know what? That wave of 3 melee creeps and 2 range, they didn't kill off a single one of my creep wave, which was 3 melee and 1 range. And in fact, I can keep going. I can use my spells. I can make it so that my lane pushes if I want it to. No one even died. I mean, these guys are obviously close to dying, and we'd kill them off now. But do you see how it was easier to control the enemy creeps? There's just more options. You can run them in circles, you can attack them, you can use spells. It's just easier to do. So when we're thinking about lane equilibrium, we want to note how many creeps there are, and we want to understand that it's always easier, say we're the Radiant safe lane here, it is always easier to control the lane when the Dire side has more creeps than we do. When we get more creeps than they do, it becomes very difficult to ever prevent this from pushing, just the way the game works. Therefore, when we are thinking about pulling, moving into that, we want to think about how our actions are going to affect that. By having more creeps in our lane, we may end up pushing, and by having less, the carry can keep it here. It's not necessarily going to push it into us. The carry can stay here, control the wave in this area. We want to allow less creeps into the lane so that our carry can do that. Now we're going to get into a classic here. Classic mistake. We're going to see what happens when we do a full pull, which is where we're going to pull the entire small camp, we're going to pull the entire wave, and we're going to see what happens when the lane was sitting at equilibrium roughly right now. Now if I pull this entire wave, there we go. Remember how they were meeting here at equilibrium? Well, now there's nothing for them to meet. What are Jug's options? The option that most people are going to take in pub games are that he's going to let them follow him under this tower, and then he'll try to last hit like that. Some people will pull it all the way through, meet the next creep wave, but the next creep wave is still quite a while away. Another thing you can do is just run them around, attack them outside of tower. Again, you're going to take a lot of damage for that. There are no creeps here, so Axe, for example, would be free to just attack Juggernaut without really being worried about getting hit himself. So many people will go with that option I talked about first, where they just run under tower and they let these creeps do their thing. So let's show that. And by show that, I mean we're going to come over here. We're going to say we're trying to do a small pull. Unfortunately, this is the best camp we could possibly have gotten to make this example harder. But we're going to attack our own creeps, trying to deny as many as possible. How's Jug doing? Not really doing anything. Okay, so we can deny these. Do you see we have an issue here? Do you see how that was the best single camp you could pretty much get, in my opinion? The Vol Assassins are also quite close, but that Ghost does a lot of damage to creeps. So getting all 3 melee creeps killed is pretty much the best thing we could do. And although Juggernaut just got essentially a wave to himself, which is nice, we'll talk about the XP stuff later. Let's think about in terms of lane equilibrium. We have 2 ranged creeps now. And what we just talked about in the last part was that it is very difficult for Juggernaut to control this wave. Ignoring all the possible pulls, it is now very difficult to control this wave because you have 2 ranged creeps doing a lot of damage. I'm not even going to go for last hits. I'm just going to try to control the wave again here. Oh, I lied. I couldn't stop my own auto attack. But you see, I don't have an option, right? I have to wait. Okay, now we can hit this guy. And I have to wait again. I'm waiting. I'm missing all my last hits. Okay, Axe is here. Get out of here, Axe. But the lane is pushing. These guys are going to kill this creep off. We'll just show it, actually. They're going to kill these creeps off, probably. And now it's an equal lane again. Except for the fact that this guy took so much damage in that time. And it's going to get hard to control this. Especially because Axe is not just going to watch us do our best to control it, right? He's going to be doing his own creep tricks and whatnot to keep the lane pushing in his favor. All of this to say that when you do a single pull like this, and you do not kill off all the creeps, you end up pushing your wave in terms of equilibrium. Also note that that was a full... You know what? Let's do this again, but with a different camp. The Ghost camp was the best example we could have gotten. Let's find the worst. Here we are in the exact same situation, but this time with a Kobold camp, which is the worst camp you could get in terms of trying to do a full small pull like this, because we talked about pierce damage for the range creep. Most small camps have pierce damage as well, except the Kobolds. They all have basic attack. So not only are they super fragile, they have miserable attack damage, and they do basic attacks, so they don't get that bonus damage. Oops, Jug, you stay there. Let's watch how this pull happens. I don't even have to look at it, really. I know that it's never going to work out. None of these creeps will die, even if I wait to deny them. Jug's over here getting last hits. Not doing a great job at it. See, these creeps are just dying. And you know what? It's going to die even faster if we're trying to get the last hits, too. Look how little damage that did. Do you think Jug can control this wave? Look at this. 8 creeps. There's no saving this lane. This lane is going to push beyond control right now. Literally beyond control. Even if both support and carry sat here trying to auto attack, like nothing else will even fall below 50, I don't think. This guy might. Oh, he did. Oh, and this guy did too. So I was a little wrong. But at the same time, do you see how many creeps we have? It's very difficult to fix this at this point. So, what can we conclude from those 2 examples? Doing a small pull that pulls the entire wave is not the best for us. Especially if this guy lets them come under tower, which is probably the most reasonable decision he can make anyways, because otherwise he has to take a lot of damage from tanking the creeps, or he faces a lot of possible harass from the enemies. He probably does need to bring the creeps under tower and last hit them. It is difficult for him to, say, even if he pulls it through and waits for the next creep wave, or maybe even waits for this creep wave to die, same thing. These towers are going to hit the creeps a couple times, which are, you know, that's going to factor into pushing the wave. He could run them around, sure, and meet the creeps back here. But what's going to happen is that while you're laning here awkwardly, the other team is going to come, harass you, of course, and then the next creep wave, so this one, will walk under tower while you're still over here laning. Worst case scenario. And then what? How are you supposed to get both of these creeps? The creeps back here and the creeps under tower. You can't. It just leads to a bunch of awkward scenarios. So, pulling a small camp and pulling the entire wave when the creeps are in equilibrium is generally bad. New scenario. What if we still want to do a full small camp pull into the wave, but we don't want to end up pushing really hard? So what if instead, when we think about equilibrium here, what was happening? Just both waves were meeting here and we weren't pushing in either direction. So this wave, this third wave, would meet this third wave at around this area. And the reason those last two pulls were not working for us was because we would pull our third wave into here, and then the dire third wave would meet us here, but we had killed all our creeps and all of their creeps, so then it had nowhere to go but under our tower. And then that was bad because it resulted in us pushing. What if instead we push our wave a little bit beforehand? So Juggernaut is killing off this wave, and he's just going to be auto-attacking, so it pushes a bit. And then our second wave, which originally had died off, it's going to survive, and it's going to be pushing. So it's going to meet the dire third wave around here, maybe. And now they're going to fight, and it's going to buy us time to do this small pull. Now, as we've seen, our small wave will kill off this camp, and we'll have a survivor. But you know what? Because our third wave will take a lot of damage from this small camp, and then the dire third wave will take damage from our second wave, it might even out. It might work out for us. Let's see if I can do this, and I can manage this with doing it on my own. So we're going to pull this one here, while Jug is pushing the wave. Just auto-attacking should be fine. I'm going to come down here. Complete pull. Go take a look at Jug. He was auto-attacking a little too much, but that should be okay still. You see how he has bought some time for himself? We'll have him come wait down here next. Now this pull's almost done. Where is my... There we go. Now he's holding the wave out here, okay? He's not taking as much damage as before. And he's gonna... Now, what have we got? Our third waves, the Radiant third wave, has successfully killed a small camp and is now here. The dire third wave has finished off the second wave of ours, our Radiant second wave, and has now met here. The fourth wave of dire is coming in to reinforce, but that's okay because the fourth wave of Radiant is coming to reinforce. And if we take a look, we have about 6 creeps. They have about 7 creeps, although this one's about to die. But this has returned to relative equilibrium. Granted, it's a little harder now, right? Managing 4 creeps versus 4 creeps is easier than 6 creeps versus 6 creeps, especially with range creep buildup. So the ideal would have been to either for these waves to die off first, which would have been possible, I think, in a normal game, but I was having trouble, right, because I'm, like, microing too. But in a real game, the support could have been killing the waves so they come out sooner, and then same with over here, so that the creeps can meet sooner, kill each other off before these reinforcements arrive, so that it would be closer to a 4v4. But if I'm Jug here, you know what, I can fight like this. I can deny this guy. Unfortunately, I can't get them to the range creep. Well, maybe I could if I had a dire hero, but I don't. And if you can get this range creep killed off, then you know what? If Jug doesn't want to have to deal with 2 range creeps on both sides, if our range creep is killed off, say at the small camp, or deniable, then he can just come up and kill off this range creep. And he has that option because it's a dire creep, so he can just attack it at full health. And then that becomes a little easier to manage. When there's a lot of creeps, what's difficult is not that there's a lot of melee creeps, it's that there's 2 range creeps. And trying to last hit around 2 range creeps is very difficult because they do a lot of damage. Whereas if it's just 1 range creep, and even if it's like 7 melee creeps, it's honestly a lot more manageable than 2 melee creeps and then 2 range creeps versus the same 2 range creeps and like 3 melee creeps. That is a lot harder to handle, in my opinion, than the former. So this is one way which we might do a small pull in a way that maintains equilibrium in a relatively favorable spot. I will note this was a ghost camp. So what's hard about this technique is that, say we had kobolds that don't kill your creeps off at all. That's really hard to do. And there's like almost no way to handle that really. But what if we had a different camp that does damage but not so much? So maybe it only kills off 1 creep. Well, then Jug also has to keep that in mind and like push a certain amount but not so hard so that like it all equals out. it makes this difficult, right? Where if he had pushed and he had 3 creeps surviving, but then we had the wrong small camp, that's too much, we end up pushing. Or if he has 2 creeps pushing, but then we like barely kill off any, like that also gets hard. Ideally, he wants as many of his own dead, but the reason he still wanted some alive in this case was so that he didn't have to tank all of these enemy dire creeps, and he didn't have to bring them under tower. He had a third choice, which was to just slowly allow them to kill his own creeps, and then they make it here, and by that time, that has bought enough time for our third wave to return to the lane. Let's look at another example. So here we have the same example, but we're going to run it out a little differently. So I had Juggernaut push the lane, they fought up here, so this is the remainder of the third wave, the Dire's third wave, and our third wave here is finishing off this small camp. Now, why did this pull work last time? Well, he pushed it, they killed it, they're here, and now he's supposed to run these creeps around a little bit without getting under tower, and he's supposed to keep them here until these creeps kill off this camp, then run over here, they meet here, and then this is the third wave, this is the third wave, they've now met here, eventually the fourth waves come join in, and that's how that worked. What if he runs under tower? And I think this is something very common that many pub players would do. They would run these creeps under the tower would kill these creeps. And then what do you have? You have our third wave, but no third wave for the Dire. So our third wave is going to run up and probably meet the Dire's fourth wave around here, start fighting, and then our fourth wave is going to come back them up, and we're going to have, let's say this guy dies, so we'll have 2 creeps here, 4 creeps here, versus 4 Dire creeps. That math might be difficult for some of you, so I'll tell you that 6 is more than 4, and that your lane is now officially pushing. What if, instead... Well, let's first finish that thought. Whose fault is that? Is that Jug's fault for running under tower? Maybe. It might be. Sometimes, carry players, you shouldn't do this. You should be tanking the creeps out here until they join back up. It's not my fault for small pulling. You should have kept this creep alive. But sometimes it is our fault. Can Juggernaut just tank these 3 creeps? Juggernaut probably can, because he has Healing Ward. But other heroes are not so good at this, like Drow, other fragile, ranged heroes, who I suddenly can't think of, because I'm panicked and making a video. They don't want to tank 3 creeps. And don't forget, there are 2 enemy heroes in the game. And if for some reason they're not over here, then they're going to be here, hitting your carry. Can your carry sit here and take 3 creeps and 2 heroes worth of harass on their own? Probably not. So is it really their fault then if they have to run under tower to survive? And they'll at least be able to get these last hits, but now the lane is going to push. Whose fault is that? I don't know. It's kind of complicated, right? Should we have done this if we knew that they would not be able to tank these creeps? That's the kind of question that we have to think about, whether they're a hero that can do that or not, how safe they are in the lane. I think we covered some of these topics in the benchmark that we covered in the first video, XP and Gold. But now let's run into the second scenario that I talked about earlier. What if Jug runs these creeps over here?
All right, carry on.
So he's going to come over here, try to deny this. Now we got a lane over here. Juggernaut wants to get last hit, so why don't we come to lane? What does Juggernaut do now? Where does he go? Does he return to lane and then he lets you do this? Yeah, that could work. Do that. Juggernaut, go back to lane. Now what's this guy doing? This guy's like under tower. Oh no, he wasn't supposed to die there. Now what? It's kind of awkward, right? In this case, it kind of worked out a bit, where this camp mostly died, and the 2 remaining creeps died shortly after, so they did run back over here. That guy got kind of lost a bit, but this overall, in this particular case, was sort of okay. But sometimes they don't die so quickly, or they don't take so long to die, and then you end up with, say, 3 creeps alive, and then they struggle back here for a lot longer. And then what? Then you have to split it awkwardly. It gets really weird. And so all of this is to say that it's difficult to make a small camp pull work in a pub game, because this is all in an empty lobby, and we see it worked out here. But what if the 4 support runs over and they nuke this wave so that we have a full creep wave? And the whole idea that worked before that, you know, our second wave that was like 50 to 75% health fought their third wave at full health, and then met our third wave that had been reduced to about 50 HP as well. Well, what if our third wave is just full health because the guy came and nuked the small camp? And now we have a full health third wave with a partially healthy second wave fighting their third wave. That doesn't work. We're going to push there. Or what if we're split the creeps and they come and interrupt, or they shove this creep wave in so that these creeps meet under tower, and then this one is still like over here. Like, there are so many variables once you enter in the enemy heroes who are not just going to let us try to get this ideal scenario. That's why small camp pulls, as they currently stand, are very difficult. The only small camp pull we didn't cover is the small pull into the hard pull, but I already explained why that's difficult on its own, is because this connection is hard, and it's likely to get interrupted. And more than that, I'll reveal it. I was going to hold it for a secret because this is under golden experience distribution. Why is a pull good? I'm sneak peek ahead. A pull is good because we're getting golden experience. Ignoring the lane equilibrium side, why is it good in terms of golden experience? We're getting the experience and gold from this small camp, and anything that dies over here is hopefully not in range of the offlaner, who's supposed to be in the lane. Now, the 4 support might have run over, that's true, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they're over here, and so no one got this experience. That is really good. When you do a connected pull to this hard camp, and the creeps run over here and die, by this point, they should have noticed, like, where are our creeps? They must have pulled. And if the creeps still don't return to lane, then they should know that it's in this hard camp. But you know what? An offlaner standing here will get the experience from the wave in the lane, and the creeps dying over here. So now we're losing out the benefits of denying golden experience to our offlaner, who can now potentially get experience from both the creeps here, and if they see you fighting this hard camp, maybe there's someone who can even try to steal the last hits on these very early. And then you've given them the gold from a hard camp and possibly split the experience with them, which could have been bad. Maybe not. It's a little complicated. It's getting tough, right? That's why this kind of pull is a bit harder to work with. Let's recap a little bit about what we've covered. We would like to be able to do small camp pulls so that, you know, we can get a couple creeps killed. This denies experience and gold from our offlaners, and also makes it a little easier on our carry by reducing the pushing power of our lane. So if only, say, 2 creeps show up to lane and the enemy has 4, well, works out for us. But we said that small pulls are a little difficult to do in pub games. Part of the issue is that connecting to the hard camp is a bit difficult, and that it also depends a bit on our carry to know to tank the enemy creeps outside the tower until our creeps are able to rejoin and meet here. But then sometimes it's not the carry's fault either, where they are just some fragile carry that can't tank creeps and they're forced to run under tower. So what is our answer in this situation? Well, let me introduce you to something called the half pull. I'm calling it the half pull because I don't know if I don't know if there's a term for it, so that's just what I'm going to call it. The goal of this is to only aggro the back 2 creeps. Technically, any 2 creeps would work, but I think the back 2 are the best. Because if you take the range creep and 1 melee creep, we deny 2 creeps, which usually when we were pulling the whole wave, we were only getting 2 creeps killed anyways. And by sending 2 melee creeps forward into the wave, these are the tankiest creeps, right? 1 melee and 1 range will not buy you as much time as 2 melee creeps. So now the carry does not have to tank the wave on their own. Let's show this.
All right, carry on.
The carry also does not need to particularly do much for this to work. It's something that just you will do, and that makes it a little safer to do in pubs. For better or for worse, when you can do something on your own, it's a little safer. You're going to hit at 118, around there. And we're just going to aggro the back 2 creeps like so. If you need a more in-depth explanation, I will either link in the bottom or put like a thingamajig here to click wherever. That'll show the mechanics video where I explained how to do this and how to practice this. Let's see what happens. Let's not even look at the lane. Let's just focus on denying our creeps. You know what? We can even get this last hit. We can get this deny. would you look at that? These 2 creeps are still alive. Last time, we did a small pull at this 1 minute and 18-second mark. All these creeps died, and then we weren't able to make use of this camp anymore. What's happened to the lane in this time? All our creeps are finally about to die. This is still their 3rd wave. This range creep is from our 2nd wave. He's about to die. You know what? It's okay if these creeps run under tower. You know why? Because this 4th wave is about to meet this 4th wave. So these creeps just need to die. It's okay that they're under tower. It's not like before where we needed these creeps alive to kill the creeps off at this camp. All our creeps are dead from the 3rd wave. These are just extra 3rd creeps from the dire side. And so now they can run under the tower and just die. So the carry can have a very safe time farming here. And then this 4th wave will meet the next 4th wave right here. Let's have him stand here. You know what we can do with this camp? We can stack it now. What does that do for us? Well, remember how the Vols and the Ghosts were the best single camp to have? But even they could not kill off a full creep wave on their own? This is why you typically needed to stack the small camp before doing a full pull, and then it would kill off the entire creep wave. And that is by default the best scenario in pulls. If your entire creep wave dies, right, then it's similar to what I was just describing, where this 3rd wave of dire creeps were just extra because our 3rd wave was dead. So if we can kill off the entire wave without having to do any tricks, that's fine. And you know what? When we have a stacked camp, we do. We are able to kill off an entire creep wave. But we still have a choice, actually. I can pull this entire creep wave and get them all killed and probably kill off this entire camp. But that would require Juggernaut to tank this entire wave under his tower. Juggernaut himself can do it because he has a healing ward, but maybe other heroes can't. So our carry, I should say instead of Juggernaut, our carry has to deal with the entire creep wave on his own. So you know what? Even though this is stacked and we can do a full pull, what if we just did another half pull and got another 2 creeps denied, left our carry 2 creeps to tank for them, and then this camp is still going to be alive, and we can just do another half pull after that, or maybe even a full pull. So let's try. Let's try doing another half pull. I'll run down here. Half pull. How is our wave? We have, well, look at that. A fairly equal wave. So our Juggernaut should be fairly fine. Now this is meeting up here and it's like fluctuating a bit. Part of that is because I'm not managing the wave at all. If your carry was here, like they would have an easier time doing some of this. But honestly, even up here is not too dangerous for most carries, depending on the game. But look at that. We just got our 2 creeps denied. I didn't have to do anything. And we still have a sizable camp. Large enough, in fact, to do a full pull right here. Now, would we want to do that? Maybe. It's up to us. I think I actually attacked too slow. No, the Kobold's fast enough. So I think this camp will actually kill off this full wave. What is the downside of this? Well, now we're missing the 3-minute spawn. But we are denying an entire wave, which is quite nice for us. And again, Jug will have this whole wave on his own. So actually, I don't know if we really needed to pull this whole wave. This is just theoretical stuff. You can decide. But that's the beauty of this, where we had this stacked camp and we can choose. We can see if, oh, you know what? There are a lot of creeps coming in. Jug probably needs a couple creeps to tank for him. Maybe I won't pull this wave because it's going to meet here, right? There was no real reason to pull this wave except to demonstrate this. Because they already had more creeps coming in, I could have just let this wave go by and they just stand here and Jug is able to farm safely. The only benefit of this is that if Jug is still able to farm safely under tower, we also deny these creeps. But of course, that's usually not going to work out because the enemy will come contest. That's actually another part of the half pull, which we're going to get into with the experience and gold, so keep it a secret now. But maybe you can piece it together. Think on it. Look at this. Jug's getting this full camp. I'm over here. We're going to kill this off. So if we had wanted to, we could have let this camp go by, or we could have let this creep wave go by while they meet here. Jug can deal with that. And then we could have stacked this camp again, perhaps. Or maybe we could have done a half pull, and then there would still be creeps alive, and we could use them for the next minute, or the next pull at like 3:18, the wave that just walked by us. That whole wave died, we killed this, and you know what? It's only 30 seconds until the next spawn, so it's honestly not that big of a deal. And look at that, look where we are. I wasn't even really microing Juggernaut, and the lane has stayed in this area on its own. Of course, the enemy will try to come contest you and all of that. But I guess this is the secret. I'm letting it out early. We haven't even covered the golden experience section. What if someone comes to contest you? It's not such a big deal. Because there are 2 creeps in lane, the offlaner will want to stay here for these 2 creeps. Because you know what? If they leave this to come over to you, there's still only 2 creeps here. Either way, they're going to miss 2 creeps in the lane, which is very good. And yeah, they could get a bit of experience from the small camp, but you're also here to split that, so they're not getting that much. They would much rather prefer to get a whole creep wave in the lane and not let you have to deal with any of this. By splitting up your creeps, you split up what the offlaner is able to get. Remember, the reason this wasn't good was because they could stand here and get both the experience and gold from both sides. They can't reach the small camp unless they stood like here, and that depends on the wave being here. But this is kind of awkward, right? They're not going to get any last hits from either side here, and they're certainly not going to be able to get all of them. Maybe they choose to run over here to get some, or choose over to here, but they're never going to be able to run back and forth too much. If the 4 splits over and runs over to you, still not that big of a deal, because your carry is getting 4 creeps worth of experience, while their offlaner is only getting 2. Yes, their 4 support will now be getting 2 creeps solo, but our carry is getting really strong. And we're a little weaker, sure, but we're a 5 support. We don't care. Offlaners and 4s, they want to be doing a similar split, but it can be a little closer. So it's good for them if the 4 comes over here. But honestly, if you get 1 half pull off that the 4 did not make it for, like, isn't that fine? You just deleted some experience from the game, from their team. They'll never get it. And if he does contest the next one, whatever. Eventually, you will get some pulls off that do not get contested, and you will be removing experience and gold from the game. I think it's about time to start talking about golden experience, so let's head over to that. We're about to head into some math. Fair warning, though, I'm about to pull up a very bright white Excel sheet, so if you're watching this in the dark on your phone or something, that's your warning. 3, 2, 1. Boop. Math. Okay, we're not actually that worried about specific numbers here, even though I called it a math section. But to briefly tell you what's here, we got a table of the XP required to reach certain levels in the game, focusing on the early ones. That's all we care about right now. Some specific numbers on how I'm doing this. You don't have to worry about these because this stuff gets changed around, and I know they scale up, but really, we only pull at the beginning of the game, and that's all we're really focused on. We don't have to worry too much about specific numbers. I just want to explain some general concepts to you. Some of this might overlap with the Golden XP video we did at the very start of this series, but in case you didn't watch those, and because I think it's good to refresh that, because that is very central to why we are pulling, I think it's worth going over again. The first here, we have a table that shows yellow is gold, blue is experience. If you can't read it, this is the position 1 and then the position 5, so this is your safe lane, and then you've got your 3 and your 4 enemy off lane. So you'll notice what I have set up. Maybe you can't notice because you can't read it. I didn't think about that, but it's too late to change. You have, this is what's set up for 2 creeps, or 2 waves of creeps. So 6 melee, 2 ranged. We're imagining that the carry and the offlaner get every single last hit, all the XP is split, and everyone gets 240 XP, 399 gold for the carries, the cores, and 85 gold from passive gold to the supports. What we want to cover first is that in these first 2 waves, the 240 experience you get by splitting evenly all 8 creeps will get you to level 2. Now what I want to point out is that what if you deny a single creep? Let's say you deny 1 ranged creep. You'll notice that the enemy offlaner and the enemy 4 support have dropped to 222 experience, which is only an 18 experience difference, but this is quite significant, and if you didn't realize why, it's because you will hit level 2 here, and the enemies will not. They'll still be on level 1. And the thing with experience is that 222 experience might as well be the same as 0 experience in terms of how many attributes you get and how many skill points you get, because you don't get any until you actually level up. You have to pass this threshold, which means you now have this opening where you could fight them because you're both level 2 and they're both level 1. And that singular level is often enough to give you a significant advantage in terms of fighting. So we don't need to establish a large experience difference necessarily. We just need to establish some of one so that we can hit these levels first, and that can give us a chance to fight. We don't necessarily have to act on it. If it just doesn't look like a good fight or the opportunity's not there, that's okay. But we've put ourselves in a position where we get to choose whether we go for it or not, and they have to be a little scared. Now, of course, this doesn't apply just to level 2 and level 1. It applies at every point. So whether you're level 3 and they're level 2, you're level 5 and they're level 4, all of these represent an advantage. Now, level 5 to level 4, that's a little closer because now both sides do have probably all their spells, or at least the spells they want to have, and leveled them up a bit. So that advantage is not as significant as the very initial level 2 to level 1. But all of them represent an advantage. And I want to point out again, you don't need a large experience difference, you just need some. However, the larger the difference in experience, the bigger your window of opportunity is, right? So in this case, they could maybe just nuke one more creep from the third wave, quickly hit level 2, and then they're like, whoa, you can't go on us. We're level 2. And you have to be like, he's right, that's fair. We're equal levels. It is no longer a good opportunity to fight. And you have to respect that. But if they were, say, 60 experience down, which is quite large for the first 2 waves, but then if they were, they may have to kill 1 or 2 creeps, maybe even 3 creeps, and so they can't do it as quickly, and so you have this longer period of time where you are at the level advantage and you can fight them. And when you have the level advantage on them, you don't necessarily have to fight like we said, but you're just more free to do other things. So say you could go pull as the hard support, and you're level 2 and the enemy 4 support is only level 1, if they come fight you, well, you have 2 spells to use on them, or maybe to get away, or I don't know, it depends who you're playing really. But the fact is, you have 2 spells, they have 1, and it's harder for them to contest your pull. So you don't necessarily have to fight, you can do other things, and whatever you want to do, you have an advantage in, and they do not. Let's now imagine what happens when we do a small pull. We pull the entire wave into our small camp. Usually that can get about 2 melee creeps denied. So let's see what would happen. We can remove the 2 melee creeps from their experience. The small camp usually gets killed off, and we're the only ones in range. And because we're doing a pull, we end up outside range of XP for a little bit. So let's say we make it in time for... let's say we make it in time for one of the melee and one of the ranged when we're next to our carry. That you do the pull and then you return to the lane. So now we can take a look and we see we started to build an advantage for our lane when they are still just splitting all the experience and the offlaner is getting all the gold. We're not even factoring in any denies that the carry or the offlaner may have gotten yet. And we aren't going to do that here, actually. But anyways, you'll see that we have more experience than either of these guys, even though we were only in range for 1 melee and 1 range creep. But because we got the small camp, which is worth on average about 100 experience, that is about the equivalent of, say, 2 creeps. And so we are actually ahead, the 5 support is ahead of both the position 3 and position 4, because not only did we get that experience from the small camp, but we killed 2 melee creeps out of the off lane's experience range. So they didn't get any. What if we did 2 half pulls instead? So instead of pulling the entire small camp into the entire creep wave, where we only got 2 melee creeps killed off, we do a half pull that kills, usually we aim for the range creep and the last melee creep, and we do that twice. So actually, they would lose out on a lot more. They're now all the way down here, because they're only getting 4 melee creeps to split between them. Now, we still only get 1 small camp's worth of experience, but do you see how we've now stretched that small camp's value? Where we didn't necessarily get more out of it, but we denied more from our opponents by killing a ranged and a melee creep outside of their experience range 2 times. This is why I think the half pull is so good, is because really it accomplishes almost the same thing as a normal pull, pulling the entire creep wave, but it's safer and it's more reliable, where we don't really need our carry to know what they're doing. It's just like, hey, somehow, even if you don't know what you're doing, you only have to balance 2 melee creeps first there for creep wave. Like, you should be fine. And even if their wave comes under tower, we're good. So it's very easy to do. We deny a lot of experience from them, and we deny the most preferable ones, right? The range creep and then a melee creep, and we get them all killed outside of range. The benefit of only pulling 2 creeps as well is that they die sooner. So before you had 3 melee creeps all tanking some damage, because sometimes the small camp focuses on different creeps, and so it takes a little longer to do the pull. But this time, because you're only pulling 1 ranged and 1 melee, they all focus the melee creep right away, get him down to 50, and you can help deny. And then, as long as you don't pull aggro, they will all focus the range creep, which is very fragile. And the range creep, if we think about it, used to be the one who would always survive, because all the melee creeps were in front tanking the damage from the small camp, and it was never dying. Because eventually all the melee creeps died, but the small camp was dead, and so the range creep returned to lane. That was the most valuable creep in the wave, actually, to get to the lane. So if the enemy offlane could pick, like, if we only get 1 creep, what do we want it to be? We wanted it to be the range creep. We don't want it to be the range creep, and so getting it denied is actually great for us. It's better to get 1 ranged and 1 melee creep denied rather than 2 melee creeps denied. We have been talking a lot about the small camp, and I think we've mostly covered it. We're going to move on to the hard camp here, which conceptually is mostly the same as the small camp, right? We're trying to get some experience from getting the kills, trying to control lane equilibrium, trying to deny some experience and gold from the enemy, but it's harder because of the position of the camps, because this one's easy, this one's hard, because mechanically, like, they run all the way into lane, so it's easier to pull, and this is, much harder to do on your side. Well, these pulls are kind of okay, but it's easier to pull for the offlaners. That's just kind of how the game is designed. So the hard camp pull is harder to do. It's higher risk and higher reward if you can get it right, but you can only do it in certain situations. So we're going to cover some of those now. Now, the small camp you can think of as being about 2 melee creeps in terms of experience and gold, because they're about 100 experience, about 66 gold. Hard camps are about 160 experience and 100 gold, so they're about 3 melee creeps. But I often just think of them as worth, about 1 wave, just to make it easier. So this is half a wave, this is a full wave. And it's not that much of a stretch when you think about it, because oftentimes creeps do get denied, so you lose a bit of experience. Maybe you miss a last hit. So just for the sake of ease, so that when I can judge as I'm playing, like, ooh, was this a good pull? Was it bad? How bad is it? I can think, like, if they get this, if the offlaners get this camp, they're 1 wave ahead of us. Let's actually get into that now. So why did the small camp pull work? Well, because you could pull it here and just kind of, like, it's so much harder to get from the lane to the small camp, so it's harder to get experience, all of that. We talked about this briefly. Whereas in the hard camp, when you pull it, they're kind of in range for experience just by being in the lane, right? And it's easy for them to position in a way to try to steal last hits, to be in this area. It's not so bad. Let's start with the same example we went last time, where, remember when we had lane equilibrium here, and then we tried to do a full small camp pull, and it was no good? The reason it was no good, let's say it was the third waves that were supposed to meet here, but we've pulled the entire third wave here, and then the dire third wave just walked under tower and died, and then our third wave usually survived to some extent, say 2 creeps survived, well, then they joined up with the fourth wave, the radiant fourth wave, and then we had the third, like half of the third wave and the fourth wave meet the enemy's fourth wave. So naturally our lane was pushing, and that's why pulling at equilibrium here was bad for the small camp. For the hard camp, it's a similar reason, but different on why it's bad. So what happens if you manage to do this pull, which is very difficult, because not only is the leash range small, but also if the dire creeps are here, oftentimes your creeps will just go meet them and get distracted from this hard camp pull, and also the enemies can see you, so they'll contest this. This is a very rare, but let's think about why it would also be bad to do. Your third creep wave, let's say, walks up to this camp. The good thing about the hard camp is that they usually will kill off an entire creep wave. Well, this can be good or bad, but they will usually kill off an entire creep wave on their own without needing to be stacked like the small camp. Which means the Dire's third wave would walk under your tower and die, and your third wave would walk up here and die. And so the lane technically doesn't push because the next fourth waves are just going to meet here and you're at equilibrium. So in terms of pushing, it's okay. But because your carry is going to be trapped down here, they're going to have to be running around tower, maybe running back here with the enemy creeps following them. They can't really come contest. And you're probably too scared because you're a position 5 against an offlaner and a 4 support. You may not even be able to contest. You can try to be in range to steal experience, but it can still be very risky for you. And they are going to get not only your third wave, but also a hard camp. So, warning, Excel sheet coming up, 3, 2, 1. Instead of just, so this is the even split, still at the 6 waves, or 8 creeps between 2 waves. So instead of, say, what am I doing? The third waves meeting, like usual, and it becomes that situation we just described. Technically, our carry is still getting both waves of experience, but now the enemy offlane is getting a hard camp's worth of golden experience between them, and they're starting to build an advantage over you. Now let's say you're able to steal some experience, so it ends up something more like this, where it's split between 3 of you, but you can still see why this is an issue, right? Even if let's say you're out of range for some of the XP, actually. Let's say you're out of range, so your carry is getting more XP overall. It's not the best. Actually, this is a little deceptive. Let's switch it to this. Where this is not the best, right? Because the carry is getting most of the waves, but actually both the offlaner and the 4 support are very close to being equal in terms of experience. Both of them are, and you are down here. 60 experience is not nothing at the start of the game. He's getting a lot more gold. 50 sounds not too much, but it kind of is. All of this, like small values at the beginning of the game, do matter. And remember, this is just one wave. If this happens again and again, suddenly you're, before it's like 60 XP behind, and it's like, okay, it's not too bad, but it happens again, and now you're 120, 180, getting further and further behind. All these small numbers are adding up. And that's assuming you were even able to get any experience. If you got no experience, like we said originally, like they're going to be ahead of your carry, you're going to be way behind, they have more gold. Like, it's just a bad scenario, and it's very difficult to stop them if you did this pull. Now, the same thing kind of happens here. So it's deceptive, right? Where it looks here, it's very obvious, I think. Many of you would not think to pull right here, the hard camp, because you're like, oh, the wave is where we want. This is where most people make mistakes, where you're actually about to see the exact same situation, but it's going to happen up here. Where right now it's sort of at equilibrium here, and we think, oh, I don't want that to happen. I want to pull the wave. So I'm going to be Jakiro here. Oh, I hope I gave myself enough time to do this. I think it should be okay. Yep. We pull the whole creep wave because we were like, oh, we don't want the equilibrium to be up there. This is good for us, right? Uh-oh, what's happening? Their creep wave is running down here. Okay, well, in this case, the range creep got distracted. But isn't this the exact same situation I just described? Where their creeps are under tower. So if your carry wants to get these last hits, he has to come under here. And the enemy offlane, are going to be able to get your creep wave and the experience here. They're not even going to have to tank any damage because the creeps are attacking these, whereas our carry is tanking damage from the creeps. In this case, this range creep got distracted, so maybe that's good for us, maybe that's bad. Sometimes your carry can bring the creeps over here, and it becomes this party of we got a large camp involved, we got both creep waves, both heroes on each side. It gets to be a little complicated here, and I can't say necessarily if that's good or bad. It kind of depends who's winning the lane, whether it's good or bad. But it's very messy when that happens. And carries don't really like that, especially in pub games where carries aren't always the best, right? They're not used to, like, I need to get this range creep here, and this melee creep here, get this deny here, this hard camp here. It becomes this awkward mess. And you want to avoid that as much as possible as a support. Try to give your carry an easy time. This is part of babysitting them, not just in terms of, they're getting golden experience here, but it's a little more reliable when it's like a normal equilibrium lane as opposed to this, clown fest up here. Here is an example of when it is okay to do a hard pull, or when it can at least work out for you. So right now, these are our second and third waves that are fighting the fourth wave of the Dire, and this is our fourth wave down here. So we want our fourth wave to get killed off, and then that will essentially reset equilibrium because our creeps are going to kind of kill their creeps here. And the reason this is like not necessarily something you want to aim for or hope to do. This is fine. I didn't pull the whole wave, but we got 3, which is kind of good enough. But really is kind of my mistake. I kind of meant to pull all of them, guys. But as you can see, the creeps are staying up here, and now they're going under tower. So we're buying time while we can say, I should have been auto-attacking these creeps to get them killed off. If this, I'll miss that last hit. It's fine. It's not really what we're here for. So this time it's kind of awkward because they're like running back and forth through these trees, kind of getting funneled. This doesn't happen as much if you have, say, more of the trees broken. So here, this is actually a good example. So if the entire creep wave had died, then we'd be okay. Like, look, equilibrium is here. We're happy. They did not all die. This range creep survived. So even though I said, I guess I lied a bit, the hard camp can kill off an entire creep wave on its own. It kind of depends sometimes, depending how the creeps meet and how much you help them along. So if I had been like helping out to auto attack more and they hadn't been awkwardly running through here like this, it would have been more okay. But if a creep survives like this, you're just going to end up pushing again. So like instead of equilibrium, like before our lane was pushing and it was up here. And now it's kind of reset to down here, but it's going to be pushing again. So it's it was like a temporary solution. Now if I'd gotten them all killed off, that would have been more okay. Equilibrium's down here. But that's why it kind of depends, like, how you're able to pull, like, what's able to happen up here. Yeah. Oh, and like I was saying, so, like, having the creep wave up here is not ideal generally, right? So we don't usually want to aim to push our wave up here so now we can hard camp pull. Like, usually we'd prefer to just, like, keep it down here and then, like, do a bunch of small pulls, maybe do a couple connected pulls if we need to. But the hard camp pull, in my opinion, tends to be something that I only use when the lane is getting out of control. And it's like, oops, we're pushing the lane. This ain't good. A small camp pull won't fix this, and it's too late for me to run over here to pull. Like, I guess I'll try to do a hard camp pull and see what we can get out of that. But we want to avoid what we talked about just previously, where, we need to judge the lane and make sure it's like, oh, this lane is pushing, so now we can hard camp pull. If it is equilibrium here, there's a risk to it, where, yeah, we can do the hard camp pull and reset equilibrium here, but there's a good chance the enemy team will get more resources for this wave. But maybe in the long term, that's okay. Maybe we can now keep equilibrium here for the next couple waves, do a couple small pulls, and regain that advantage. So it's very difficult for me to say, like, for certain, to tell you, like, you will always pull here, you will never pull here. It's always going to be this, like, decision you have to make on the fly. And I hope that painting out these scenarios here helped to see the results of different pulls. And now you can combine that with the XP and gold video we watched at the start, and you can make the judgment on your own. You can say, is it too dangerous of a lane to not have equilibrium here? In that case, we need to have equilibrium here, even if it means giving them a little bit more resources in this pull. Or maybe you can say, you know what, we're pretty strong. I don't want to give them these resources for free. Even if equilibrium's up here, the carry is safe. So let's just slowly restore it by doing, say, a couple half pulls and maybe a connected pull, that sort of thing, rather than try to give them a lot of free resources. And you have to make these decisions based on who you are, who your carry is, who the offlaner is, who the support is. Are you guys currently winning the lane? Are you losing the lane? What are those benchmarks you're trying to hit? Are you just trying to get your carry to a certain point and then ditch the lane? Maybe you can just spend a lot of time away, and it's okay they're getting extra resources because you're giving your carry a bunch of the resources by not taking any. Like, all this kind of plays in. It's so tough. To be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about this video, guys, because I wanted it to try to help answer more of these questions for you guys, like when can I pull, when can I not.
All right,
But
carry
it's
on.
so hard. There's so many like individual things to it. We can just watch. This lane will push. I think probably end the video here. And you guys let me know, please. Like, I think we did cover some useful information here that I hope will help you identify a bit more on when to pull. My general recommendation, game plan into the game, is try to do a half pull at 118 here, the very first chance you get. And then from there, you can choose whether you stack this again at 2 minutes or do another half pull.
Feel bad for your top tower.
Use this as a, like, last minute measure kind of thing when you're really pushing. I will put in the comments. So you see our lanes pushing again. It's pretty much right back to where it was before. Do we have time to do another pull? I may have been too slow. Oh, we got it. Let me know if this was helpful to you guys, and if it wasn't, like what questions you still have, so I can try to address that. Because I wanted this video to be better, and now I don't know how I feel about it. But I think we did cover useful information that will help clear up at least some issues. So I think we will go with it. Yeah, here's where it ends up being a real party, right? You have like stuff happening here. Shakira's not the best at this. He doesn't have a nuke. When you have a nuke, it's a little safer to do this because you can kind of guarantee your team will get the last hits on the hard camp. Whereas without it, it's not. And you see how we're kind of still stuck in this, like, our lane keeps pushing. Even though we're doing these hard camp pulls, like, our lane is still staying up here. To fully reset it, we kind of need to shove it all the way into the lane or something. Or all the way into the tower. Or to slowly do a lot of half pulls that eventually just reduce the amount of creeps that enter the lane, so eventually it'll just shift towards us. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching. See, look how much it's pushing again. Do a half pull. I'll fix it. I was trying to end the video, but now I'm like, no, wait, I can fix this. And I can show you guys. We're going to pull the whole thing. The hard camp is going to spawn here. And then we'll try to do a connected pull. See, this is an issue too, where sometimes this happens. They lose focus. I guess it didn't show a connected pull, so this will be... It's kind of okay that the range creep went through, but it depends on the lane. I know, it's so annoying, right? But honestly, it's like we were painting this perfect picture. The game doesn't happen like that. You just have to do the best you can and wing it. Like, he'll die off here. No big deal. No, the wave's kind of at equilibrium here. You see, these guys are going to die. It's all kind of okay. So in that case, it was okay for the range creep to run out because something like that happens. Where if he's the only one there, he just gets killed really quickly because he's so fragile. So it's not a huge deal. And these guys are still fairly healthy. He's a little low, but, you know, you're not going to be able to do too much with a pull now, or like if the enemy offlane tries to pull, this camp will usually die off a little sooner now, and then their wave will push into you, so it's kind of okay that they got this because the equilibrium is in your favor now. It's this weird chess game of like who will get what. So hopefully this helped you be able to make those informed, chess game decisions, and if not, please tell me, and I'll try to adjust that and fix that in a future video, I guess. I don't know. Okay, thanks. Bye.